Wow, what a privilege to behold my followers and supporters on this platform today. There is some issues that are happening in our national development today that have called for an urgent concern. Why do we have much violence everywhere, either in form of violence crime, violent extremism, or issue of terrorism? And what can we do, or what has been done in order to prevent and counter this violence and extremism? And that discovered that in 2016, the Secretary General of the United Nations presented a policy framework before the General Assembly, which was adopted and known as policy framework and action plan to prevent violent extremism all over the world. And that document contains some certain provisions that gave other states the opportunities and power to go back to their state and look at their local peculiarities, to also adopt their own framework to ensure that violence can actually be protected and prevented. So on this note, I'm going to look at the global framework for preventing violent extremism, as well as in Nigeria in 2017, we have our own action plan and policy framework for preventing and cutting of violent extremism in 2017. And I believe that if we have been trained and we have a better understanding, this level of violence, either in National Assembly or in other facets of our national development, to a very large extent will be reduced. Because whenever there is a conflict and there's an opportunity for us to negotiate, it is a responsibility, especially the leaders of our community, to ensure that we take that advantage and negotiate our conflict. Now, this global action plan for preventing violence has three frames. Number one, what are the drivers and conditions that drive violent extremism? Number one factor or condition that drive this violent extremism is poor governance and lack of economic opportunities. In every community, every country, where there are limited economic opportunities, whereby the available job opportunity cannot actually satisfy that of their population, there will be high level of poverty, high level of poor governance, and violence are imminent. Because this issue of aggression on the part of the people that the government did not have the capacity to provide for their needs, they will look for the alternative. And these are one of the conditions that drive violent extremism. Number two is poor governance and violation of fundamental human rights of people and no observance to the rule of law. When the rule of law is not being observed, when there is no respect for fundamental human rights, people will resort to the issue of self-help. There is poor governance. So if we must be able to ensure that we fight violent extremism, especially in Nigeria, there is a need for us to look at our governmental framework to ensure that there is good governance that has the capacity to deliver the good dividends of good governance to the people. Respect the right of the people, the human right. If you remember that one of the things that caused the Second World War is the issue of the breach of right. And that's why if you look at the United Nations framework, either in terms of the Charter or the Human Rights Declaration, to a very large extent, for us to ensure peace in the world, respect to the right of the people is very, very important and prominent. So in this regard, another drivers of conflict is when there's unresolved conflict. I used to tell my followers before that conflict unresolved will continue to linger and unfinished equation. There is a need for us to go back and look at the drivers of those conflicts. What are the conditions that gave rise to it, so that we're able to negotiate our conflict. Then finally, on this regard is when there is radicalization either in the prison system or all other facets of our national life. So there is a need for us to look at the government structures to ensure that government can actually provide economic opportunity for the people. When there is a conflict, we'll have opportunity to resolve them so that violence and extremism can actually reduce in our national life. So another aspect is every nation that wants to fight violent extremism has to develop their own framework. This framework can be in form of existing one now. We have the United Nations Charter of 1945, which to a very large extent is about to ensure security and the peace of the world. Then we have the Fundamental Human Rights Declarations of 1948, and we have the Global Counterterrorism Strategy of 2013, as well as several resolutions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Well, now we have action plan. Action plan, what we're supposed to do to ensure that we prevent violent extremism all over the world. Number one, I think there are about 7 priorities under that document, but because of issue of time, we just discuss issue of one. Number one is dialogue and conflict resolution. Dialogue and conflict resolution. Whenever there is a conflict, whenever there is a disagreement in any way, whether in our communities, whether in our national dialogue. Because when there is opportunity to dialogue and the waste of time of that engagement, it makes that option very, very limited. When there is a conflict, there is a need for us to negotiate that conflict so that we will not generate issue of violent conflict. But whenever you have issue of violent conflict or unresolved conflict in any society, either in governmental level, in the institutions, agencies, or in our private life or in our communities, when there is no opportunity for us to come at the table to discuss those issues, those grievances can be taken to the bush. That's why we have the Lakayawas, the issue of IPOB, the issue of Boko Harams, and all those violent conflicts. Because at every point in the national development and facet of our life, we have opportunity to actually negotiate our conflict. But when we fail to negotiate that conflict, they will go and set up a table in the bushes and begin to cause issue of insecurity and lack of peace for our people. So number one priorities under that framework for us to look at, to dialogue our conflict and look at any warnings when there is when conflict is being precipitated. There is a need for us to go back and develop capacity to resolve those violent conflicts. And in terms of community, I'm also developing a program. How do we engage what I call the CBOs, the community-based organization, that will have the capacity to begin to negotiate those conflicts so that they will not generate into violent conflict. And if even in our government institutions today, when there is a disagreement between one person and another, there is a need for us to negotiate and that conflict, because if our persons of that level are allowed to allow conflict unresolved and begin to degenerate into the level of violent conflict that can actually affect our peace and security to a very large extent, we're going to increase more security responsibility on the already tired security agencies in terms of institutions, infrastructure, and other things in terms of our security architectures, so that it becomes very vital for us to resolve that conflict. So it's better whenever there is a conflict, let us go to the table, dialogue, and resolve them. So in the further processes, I'm going to look at that framework. There are about 7 frames in that framework for us to actually look at it and begin to train ourselves. How do we resolve conflict so that will not need into violent and the high level of extremism either in Nigeria or anywhere in the world. Peace.